in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do I start up with Behold again, or did we do that last time too?
No, that is unacceptable. Behold! What is the series called?
It's the Michel PostCast, which is just, I figured the only way I could call podcasts. So,
The
what's going
Michel
on?
Post.
Xandy Pants, how is it going, man? What shall I... Okay, so, like, one of the funny things, when I was going over, like, your YouTube channel, your very first video is actually, like, you playing a very interesting instrument. And, like, oh, you got it? Oh, my God.
The
This is
mini
getting...
version. The mini version.
Okay, so can you tell us, can you tell us a little bit more about what it is? Because I have never seen that anywhere before in my life, and like, what does it do? Like, what we're looking at appears to be like some like a couple of like iron metal prongs on like a piece of wood, but it makes a great sound.
This one's out of tune, but can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you heard one really out of tune. Anyway, yeah, it sounds like a little bit like a harp, a little bit like a xylophone, a little, it's called a kalimba. They're native to Africa, where they're called umbiras. I'm probably not pronouncing that quite right, but marimbas, umbiras. They're, like you said, they're metal tines that are on a piece of wood, mounted to a piece of wood, and they have a sort of bridge. Imagine just like a bar that clamps them down. You can see them kind of bent back up here in the back a little bit, the little wings. And you can shimmy them up and down to change the pitch, and then you flick them with your thumb, or you could kind of glide your thumb over multiple to make a chord. This one is really small, so it's hard to get it to be audible, and it's out of tune anyway. This is a really small one that was like $10, and then I have actual good ones made out of like half of a coconut, or a higher quality one that has imagine like a guitar body, so there's like, it's hollow inside and there's a little hole for the sound to resonate in, that are much louder. This one is just nice because it is quiet, which you don't disturb people, and it's just really small, so you can practice. I also have small hands, so I like it. Why do I like this thing? So you're right. The first videos that I made on YouTube were kalimba videos, and those videos have done surprisingly well over time. You might have noticed. If you look at the, which I can't bring up right this second, but I can send it to you after if you want to include it, the chart for the views on that video. So when I put that video up, this was 3.5 years ago. It had obviously like 6 views, like a tiny amount, like people I know exclusively watched it. And then when the Warframe content picked up, we'll get back to that in a sec, that video retroactively did much better because my channel's search engine ranking went up, and then they were like, oh, we should recommend his other videos, and then people saw that, and I guess there's not very many good tutorials for a kalimba on the internet because it's got like close to, I want to say 100,000 views now or something insane like that. Like it's got a truly, we have to check now, but it has a truly mind-blowing number of views, which is kind of humbling. I sort of wish I'd done a better job if I knew. I was just messing around. I was like, oh, it would be nice to try doing things that I already have as hobbies in my life, rather than searching out something that I oh, here we go. Yes. 119,000 views. Okay. Yeah, truly humbling amount of people watching my crappy kalimba video. But all of that happened years after the fact. It was like it had been over a year since I put the video out, and it started taking off because of the channel success. Why this instrument? So it my 30-second version of that video for here is that this thing is really good for improvising. It's good if you don't know a lot about music, because you can just tune it to a key, and then the notes alternate like of the scale. So you'll get like note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 alternating on each side. So if you play notes that are in a row, they're going to be a chord. You don't have to know that they're a chord. They just will be. That's how the instrument's set up. And so as long as you tune it, and you could just download a tuning app on your phone, you can buy like a $10 one of these, and have a tuning app on your phone and tune it to some key and just randomly hit the notes rhythmically like you're playing a Game Boy, and it makes music that sounds good. And as long as you focus on rhythm, the melody will kind of handle itself because of the way the instrument's designed. And it's like Buildcraft. It's like you can make a build for your kalimba. Like, I'm dead serious. This is I'm getting back to that content eventually too.
So for those of you who don't know, like Buildcraft most of the time is in reference to Warframe, to the game we play.
Well, to video games, yeah.
Yeah, well, to video games, but like that it applies to like this musical instrument. I quite like that.
Yeah, like you you're making a play style. You're making you're setting things up prior to your engagement in something, usually a video game, in a way that benefits you during it. And that sort of like preparation over skill approach allows you to get your foot in the door with stuff, which is one of the reasons I like making builds for video games, is because it helps people have something to hold on to if they don't feel confident yet. And it's the same thing with kalimbas, is that if you're not confident with music, this is one of the instruments where you can do work before you play the instrument that makes you like better at the instrument, which a lot of musicians might find issue with that. Like it's not a real instrument or something, because you don't have to know the music theory, but that's snobby and this instrument is helpful. So I that's why I like it. I do plan to come back to it at some point. I legitimately think it is a good comparison to gaming Buildcraft.
The big return of the kalimba, and then all of a
That's
sudden,
right.
all of a sudden, people start looking back and be like, "What's this Warframe thing again?" Because then you become the kalimba channel. But
I'm gonna become the kalimba YouTuber.
but how did you discover this thing? Because like seriously, like I am completely not talented in music at all. But this sounds like a really great thing that I never knew about, which would be like a perfect thing for me to like start out with.
You totally should. I'm serious. You can get these for like $10. It's not very good, but it's fine. It sounds fine for the price. You could make your own pretty easily too. Where did I run into this? I honestly do not know. I think originally it was that so when I was younger, when I was in middle school, I hated music. I thought art was just a silly pursuit. The idea in my young head was that it's not reliable. Like you can't ever like have a solution or like be right or whatever. Incredibly immature take on that subject. And so I really liked math and such because you could sort of solve for it. And by the time I was in high school, I got bored of that. It just didn't interest me anymore. I had realized that to me, it wasn't really interesting to have a single solution. And maybe I hadn't been challenged enough, like it just hadn't been hard enough for me. And so to me, I felt like I flipped and said, oh, well, okay, it's the unreliable pursuits that interest me. And I learned to play electric bass because my friend played guitar and drums, and he sung, and he played pretty much everything except bass. So I learned bass. And I didn't love it. I had small hands before. If you've played guitar or bass, you know it's not exactly a good thing to have small hands if you play a string instrument, because you can't hold down the frets as easily. That's an understatement. It's extremely challenging. So I wasn't very good at that. I had fun with it, but I wasn't very good at it. And I do not remember exactly how I encountered kalimba, but you can see how, having had that experience, I would eventually get to an instrument that let me enjoy music and like pursue this aspect of the arts without like terribly a lot of experience. The other way that I got interested in kalimba is that I took music theory in high school and took the advanced placement test for music theory and did quite well in it. And advanced placement tests, you get a score out of 5. And the way the music theory one worked is that 80% of it was a written exam, and then 20% of it was you had to sight read some music and sing it. And you didn't have to like have good tonality or whatever, but you had to sing it. And then you record it and send that in. So I got every single question right on the written part, and I got literally 0 points on the singing part. So I got a 4 out of 5, which is considered very good. Like a 3 is like okay, a 4 is good, and a 5 is incredible, kind of unheard of a lot of the time. And I got a 4, but it was like an 100% on 80% of it, and then they just like threw out my singing part. So in my mind, I was like, okay, so the theory is really interesting. So what if I could make good music in practice with only music theory? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what a kalimba is. It's like you just think of a scale that you like and design what the notes are going to be, or even maybe you manipulate what one of the notes is outside the scale for some music theory reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start playing the instrument, you don't have to think about any of that stuff, and you can just play it, and it just works. It just works. Nice. Memed myself already. But
So
that's
so like you did you take like music theory just to like immerse yourself into like the theory of like this music world which you like weren't really proficient in yet, and like trying to see if you could like get into that via like taking music theory?
partially because of that. The other half was I wanted to get into electronic music, which
Mm-hmm.
at the time was not quite as popular as and ubiquitous as it is now. This would have been like 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was certainly a thing people were interested in, but not the sort of genre defining thing it is now. And so I wanted to make electronic music, but I ended up being more interested in, again, the theory, sort of like what you build out. When I made electronic music, I was less interested in the specific melody, which took me forever to make because I couldn't actually play piano or anything. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
program each individual note, which at the time took forever. There are easier ways to do that now. But I was more interested in, like what drum kit do you pick? Like that sounds better with what other instrument? And that's synergy in video games. So this is all I've always been like this. It was just I didn't know where I wanted to apply it. So that's why. Again, there was no great reason. I was at a stage in my life where I just kind of threw shots in the dark and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. And it was all stuff I care about now. I don't think it was the optimal pursuit of those ideas.
Well, I think that's like very much typical of like your time in high school, where like
Yeah.
you'll throw around like paths that you like. Oh, let me see if it can go this way. Let me see if it can go that way. I remember very clearly, like when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old. I did not consider myself to be like athletic or sporty or creative at all. I just like the only thing that I had was that like I kind of taught myself to read at the age of 3, and then like I was always like trying to like finish everything up as fast as I could, and then I sat in school and was like, oh, there's no subjects more to do. Oh, I'm so bored. Uh, and I always hated the fact that I was just like stuck with this and I couldn't do anything else. And then like my parents were like, well, why don't you try swimming? Because like your uncle has been a really good swimmer, and your cousin does a lot of swimming, and I picked up swimming, and like a couple years later I was doing national level swimming, and all of a sudden like being like a athlete sporty person was like part of my toolkit, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. I never imagined that I could make that change. uh, but that probably won't happen again. Well, I didn't think I was creative at all at that time. I was like doing school, trying to like score the best I can and like do my swimming and practicing. And look at this, I'm doing YouTube now, which like again, like who knows how creative a podcast is. Like there's not much editing going on aside from me like flipping the scenes here, but maybe I can get really creative with that.
Well,
But
still, I mean, it's still a social pursuit, though. I mean,
mhm,
I understand what you mean.
yeah, but it's so funny how like how you can you can like shift around everywhere, like trying to like find who you are and what your identity is. And I don't know if that ever stops because it hasn't stopped for me yet, as far as I feel.
Yeah, I think the big difference is it's that through line. Like I think the change I felt is that now I know that what connected all those things I was doing was this desire for like building, a system, building an idea,
Hmm.
not building a physical object, or building a physical object, but you know, you get what I mean, like
Yeah.
making a build, but as a general concept, not necessarily just video games, was what I was doing all along. I just didn't notice until I got to a certain point where I realized, oh, actually, all of that stuff is the same to me. I did all those things for the same reason, and what I was trying to figure out was where do I apply this thing that I like doing, this way I like thinking about the world. I like this metaphor that another popular YouTuber who shall remain nameless has, where when you're younger, you kind of get to move from spot to spot, looking for where your skills will get the most results. And when you're older, you get to spend the time in the spots your skills will get the most results. And So I think you're right that it is typical of younger people to be looking for those things, but I think the big turning point is when you find the through line through all that stuff, or maybe when you develop one. There might be people that, when I was a lot younger, I just like hated art. Clearly that was not the right approach for me, and then eventually I got rid of that incorrect assumption,
Yeah.
and I, unbeknownst to me, I found that correct through line where I wanted to find these builds, and then later I realized that I'd found it, and then now I can
Yeah.
kind of do whatever.
Hmm. I've always found it like really fascinating, like with like what you say with like finding your thing that you get the most results out of, and like that's what you do in your childhood, and then later on, like in adulthood, you build out and put more time into that. Like I've always wondered when it came to like talents and all that sort of stuff, like some people like when they're like in sports or when they're like wherever whatever creative business there is, and that's not just like in arts, but like just creativity and like I mean like even like something like athletics is some sort of like creative endeavor. Like there is this Pareto curve where like some people are really really good and some people are just like most people are just like not that great at it. Um, the really interesting thing is like with all these sorts of things, like there's always people there's like oh they're born talents. At first when I was like really young, I would just be like oh yeah sure that makes a lot of sense. Like people are born talented and gifted for like this one particular thing. But the more I began like thinking about it, it's like what like a lot of these things are like man-made and man thought up, and like especially right now in the age of like esports or gaming, it's like some people are like oh he's so talented at like whatever Fortnite or battle royales or maybe like Warframe or whatever games like you're talking about with skill levels, and it's like well like how is that like how did that born talent like how do you define that? Because like what if like 1,000 years ago someone like the greatest Fortnite player ever lived, but they would never be able to show off their talents because that thing just did not exist yet. Like that is, I find like quite a crazy thing to think about when it comes to like finding like what your thing is. Like it must like it can also just be such like a chance thing because like what if your thing is like thousands of years away from being developed?
Yeah, I see what you mean. There is a way in which a lot of the skills we have nowadays are composite, and so if you were the greatest Fortnite player ever and you were born 1,000 years ago, you probably still benefited from that,
Mm-hmm.
dexterity with your hands in some way. Maybe that was the person who discovered fire because
Yeah.
they were able to do the thing to start the fire more easily. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think you'd still benefit from those skills.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that it's weird how there are some skills that are sort of more or less relevant at certain times in society, and uh, the big thing to me is that talent is this divisive concept. So we have to establish how you feel about how I feel about talent. I think that talent doesn't really matter beyond the beginner level. I think talent is sort
Mm-hmm.
of an encouragement, and it doesn't really matter once you there's like talent, potential, and motivation. And talent is what helps you at the start,
Mm-hmm.
potential is what helps you at the end, and motivation is what does the actual work and does everything else. And or you might say commitment, I guess, but I think motivation is better. Um, I'm not very committed, for example, to Warframe, but I'm very motivated by Warframe. I do not mind if I need to do something else, but I am motivated to explore Warframe because it has concepts I like. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the talent, it's like talent is irrelevant in the face of a personality that just wants to be motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And potential is irrelevant in the face of someone who doesn't feel a need to become the best. But I'm not saying those things are bad or good. It's just like
Yeah.
there are ways in which like those things don't matter that much. Uh, I don't know. So I do think like it's tricky about talent because the the best Fortnite player who ever lived might have been born like last year rather than this year,
Yeah.
and or might have come into their own last year rather than this year, but they weren't motivated by the same societal factors because there weren't as many tournaments that paid a lot or whatever. And so it's not that they were a little bit better. The person who was the best at it last year was maybe a little bit better than the person who was the best at it this year, but it doesn't matter because the person this year has the massive advantage of having a better motivation.
Yeah.
and it might be because of them, it might not be. So I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
it is a really interesting topic to think about. Like, are we good at things that don't matter right now, but would have mattered in the past or will matter in the future? But at the same time, I think it's also more about what kinds of personalities the society that we live in now causes people to have. Like, what are you encouraged to? How are you encouraged to think?
Yeah. Yeah. It's dependent. It's dependent on so many things. Like actually, like when you were explaining like the talent thing, like your distinction between like the talent, potential, motivation. It's like talent itself. Like if I had to think of like a definition of talent, I don't think talent is like one tangible thing, which like you, I mean, you can't touch it anyway. But I don't think it's one thing because most of the time, talent, like you, I don't believe that you can be like talented or born to do this one thing because like a lot of these this one things are just like things that we made up. So if you go by like if you think about it, like how can something that we just thought up out of thin air as like our human creative ideas be like someone be born with that as like you like this creature was like made to do it. I think it's more of like an intersectionality of just having the right um abilities or having like the right perks and like the perfect alignment of like talents. Again, I'm using talents to describe talent, but it's like having like hey, I don't just have like the great reflexes, but I also have like the precision movement and I have like the calmness to like assess the situation, and these things come into play when I'm doing this thing. Uh, but as you say, like talent initially is important, but so much of motivation is it's insane because like I have seen, especially when I was doing sports, but even like when it comes to like YouTube and Twitch, it's like I've seen so many insanely talented people that just quit. And like I remember thinking like especially when I started with swimming that like oh we're gonna like you're gonna reach the top and these are by far the best people that have ever lived in this sports. And what you find is like the best people that I ever swam against, they all quit. They just I'm gonna go study. I quit, and it's so strange that like maybe like the people at the top right now of whatever endeavor we're talking about, they are for sure the best people at it right now that participate, but they probably may not be the best people that have participated over their lifetimes. If the people that
Yeah,
have.
I see what you mean. I mean, the flip side of all the motivation
Mm,
stuff is like there has to be a payoff. Like you might
yeah.
say, I was saying that talent and uh, a sort of potential measurement,
Mm-hmm.
those things don't really matter, but they do matter in the sense that they're promises that it's worth being motivated to do something. If I magically know, if you go pursue basketball or sewing, you will be very, very good at it. Imagine I somehow knew this.
Yeah.
Then obviously that's a pretty clear motivation to go do it. Like if I somehow knew I have this potential to do this thing, I think that might be where, for example, some people get motivated to do something their family member did because there's this vague idea that you have some similar DNA to them, so surely you will be decent at this. You know, like you
Mm-hmm.
get some kind of guarantee of value if you invest your time in that. And I do think people take that way too far and care about that way too much, but it's not like there's no reason that's there. And I think that for a lot of people, like YouTube is a great example. People don't continue with it because there's just not much of a guarantee that you're gonna thank yourself for doing that in 10 years. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think I will the way I'm doing it, but I understand why for a lot of people it's like I don't know where this is going. Like I have no. Whereas for a lot of traditional jobs, you can think, oh well, I get promoted and then I get tenure and then whatever. You know, there's a clear guarantee of value, which personally I don't care about at all. But I know a lot of people do,
Yeah.
and it makes perfect sense. Like you want to be secure in your life, and it's important to have some reassurance that the thing you're spending your time on will pay off, and you'll be happy you did that. We only get to try once after all, so
Yeah.
we want something that will be happy we invested such and such an amount of my time in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting what you're saying about like, is it the case that there were people doing this or that activity that were really good at it, but they decided to stop, and they would have been the best at it if they'd continued, but they didn't decide to continue. I feel like the difficulty there, though, is that like isn't continuing to do it a skill, you know? So it's like when you look at, let's say, you and I both swim, and let's say we were competing and about equal when we competed, but then I quit and you continued. You might say that if you knew everything about the world, it turns out that if I'd continued, I would have been better than you. But isn't it unfair to say that your ability to motivate yourself to continue is somehow like that doesn't count and doesn't attribute to your skill at the thing? Like I feel like it's, if you think about it as a build, if you'll forgive me, it's almost like you allotted some points, or some of your potential was allotted toward motivation,
Mm-hmm.
and enough of it was in motivation and enough of it was in the skill to balance out. So you were motivated enough to go do it, but you had enough of the skill to be the best. Whereas you could say, if I had chosen to do this, I allotted like too many points into the skill and not enough into the motivation, which, yes, I suppose if somehow magically I continued to do it, I would be better. But that doesn't count. I don't have the part of the skill that is being motivated to do it.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. Hold on. I can see that. Definitely. The thing that I agree with very strongly is what you say is like a lot of like there's a lot of worth in like motivation and keeping on going, because seriously, like if you're gifted at the start, or if you're like gifted at like what you do, that's great, but you gotta like see it through. If you cannot see it through, and I've seen so many people that have been so talented at something, and they just don't want to do it. Like they just don't have the motivation to like wake up like in the early mornings, or like spend their time not like playing games, which might sound weird to say in like this association, but hey, you know, in like they rather do other things than like do the thing that they're good at. And like I do think that there's so much worth in like being motivated. Like I'd rather like have someone with me that is less talented but incredibly motivated, because I'm sure that they're going to be better at like what they're really motivated to do, than someone
Oh
that
yeah.
is more talented but completely not motivated, because like they're not going to have this motivation to pull through. That being said, like there have been people that have been like incredibly good, um but didn't go on with it because of what the situation was like. And this is something which I do want to, which I do think is important to consider, especially like in the ideal world, this wouldn't be something that you'd have to consider, but in our real world, I think it is. Um, so, for example, like on the first podcast we had on Olivier van der Voort, who was like a swimmer from the Netherlands, who I swam with a couple of times. But he made it to the Paralympics in Rio, and he got to be he ranked second on the 100-meter backstroke. He's still like first or second in the world. Um, but a couple of years ago, he decided to kind of like not quit swimming, but like he went from training 30 hours a week to 10 hours a week, because he wanted to focus on something else. And part of what he said was very interesting, because he was kind of like, I want to experience new things. I want to see other things of the world than just swimming. And there's so much more than just like this. And I can also understand, like, if you've been to like the Olympics, it's like, where else are you gonna go, eh?
Right.
But at the same time, one of the things which I think also played a part in it, and I'm not like, I can't speak for him, but I can speak for myself. It's like why I stopped doing competitive swimming, and doing nationals and stuff, is because there's just no money, no future in it. Unless you are like the Olympic champion multiple times in a row, you can make some decent living of it. Otherwise, it's really really hard to get by in this industry. So like even when it comes to YouTube, I would say like definitely go try it, and like go on with it. Keep on doing it. If you really enjoy it, keep on doing it. But I think I want to be careful with saying that, like, if you tally up the sums of like talent and motivation, it's like, oh, like even if you're not that talented, you can put in all the time and motivation to like get there. I wouldn't say that that's true, because like yes, like you will get way way better, but you gotta also like keep in mind that in order for you to continue to get better at this and continue to spend time in it, you got to make sure that you can like sustain yourself in order to have more time. Because if you're chasing down this path where like you cannot sustain yourself at a certain point, and you're just chasing something which is not gonna like there's no way that you can like get anywhere with it. Not they're not saying that like you should not try and attempt to do something, but like I don't like to see people just like rush in as a fool and be like, I'm committing all my time in becoming a Fortnite streamer, and then they like they forget that they have to pay bills and they have to like eat food and like there is a nuance in there. I don't know if I worded it correctly.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think you're right that you can't, I like you were saying, you can't just tally up like your talent that will get you there initially, how much of
Mm-hmm.
that do you have? Your motivation, which will, be the body of the work, and then your potential, which will give you a ceiling. You can't just tally those and then determine like what balance and amount of those equal champion.
Yeah.
There are other factors. I think there are three other factors. I
Mm-hmm.
think the first one is not luck, but like circumstance or pragmatics. So this comes through in a lot of ways. I think one of them is having the thing itself have enough depth or opportunities that you can actually do it. So, for example, on YouTube, if you were trying to be a YouTuber at any time in history, there have to be enough ads that you can make money off of doing that, like a decent, meaningful amount of money. There
Mm-hmm.
can't just be, it's like, just because AdSense exists doesn't mean you can just magically make a living off it. There has to be enough ads that are going to get placed on audiences that you're going to get by doing your videos, of course. And that seems obvious when you say it, but there are other subtle ways where this comes through. Like maybe if you have someone who has all the ingredients to succeed personally, but they live in a part of the world where there just isn't that much support for swimming, like no one attending their practices is gonna weigh on them. Like that's gonna be a disadvantage that they don't
Mm-hmm.
have over a player that has people there. I think the second thing goes back to you mentioned practicing less, and that's like the amount of motivation that you have ends up having this sort of backward result to your skill where like if you're not as motivated, you're not going to practice as much, and for most things if you practice more, you get significantly better. And so you can't just
Mm-hmm.
say this person's innate, like skill is not a static amount, like you get more or less depending on how much you practice. And so motivation becomes a modifier to skill, and if you don't have enough, then you don't practice enough to have your, like the amount of skill you have really mean anything because you're not making it as high as it could be. You're going to have only a fraction of that skill because you're not motivated enough to practice. The third thing is maybe just sort of an unrelated ingenuity kind of thing where you can sort of overcome an equal matchup. This is something that really interests me in competitive events where you have to decide, like, if two people are evenly matched and at higher levels, what allows someone to win over somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time it can be resources, it can be that motivation that they had from like having an audience or having people that support them or having facilities that were adequate or having enough ads in the environment or whatever. But another detail is, okay, so when I was in college, I played Humans versus Zombies. Are you familiar with this?
Well, if you could explain more, I'd be
Yeah, okay,
interested.
so
Like,
it's you play with, Nerf guns or socks or whatever.
mm-hmm.
And there are humans that are like, think about every zombie movie you've seen. And there are zombies which think about every zombie movie you've seen. And you use your weapon as a human to stun the zombies. You can't kill them, they're zombies,
Mm-hmm.
but you can like take them out of play for a little while. So it's basically tag, but some people have the ability to stun the people that are it, and the people that are it can make more people that are it.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it's basically tag. Um, a lot of college campuses, it's really popular because you have kind of private property that's kind of big with a lot of buildings and a lot of open space and a lot of people with a lot of free time and a small amount of dispensable income, usually, so they can buy Nerf guns. And I played the hell out of it when I was in college. I'm tall, I have long legs, and I like competition a lot. And I played so much Humans vs. Zombies in college. And I was very good at it. And I and a few other players were the people to beat in our little community. Was at times a big community where we play with hundreds of people, and at times a smaller community with only a dozen people. And the thing that I used to succeed was mostly deceptive. I'm fast, but like I'm not like some great marksman or whatever. I don't know how you would be as a person in 21st century society. And so the first time I went, I had cargo pants, and I brought a little normal, whatever Nerf gun, But secretly, inside of the cargo pants and in my jacket, I had other loaded Nerf guns. And so toward the end, I ended up being the last person alive. You can already see where this is going. And I pretended to be like totally defeated and whatever. And this whole time, I've saved these reserve weapons. And so all the zombies come out in the field and whatever, and I act all tired and I slouch over and I kind of weakly like waste a bullet and shoot a tree and horribly miss. And they're like, "Oh, we're gonna get this guy." So of course I run into them and use up all the ammo in the gun, and then I noticeably, like dramatically, like toss it behind me and say, "Oh no, I'm out of ammo," and I like keep running whatever. And of course they all rush in a single line, and then you take out the other guns, and then that's how they get you. And then I shot all of them and totally survived easily. And eventually I ran out of ammo, of course, but I got known by a lot of the people in my community that I'm still friends with by doing that. Not because it was so skilled. Obviously, I had to be fast enough. Obviously, I had to be able to hit people behind me, but because I had a way to succeed in a situation where you would probably fail unless you had that little extra thing, we did a Hunger Games kind of simulation where we all got blindfolded and all our weapons got put in a big pile in the center like a cornucopia, and we all ran in and you took a random bag, and it might be yours, it might be someone else's, and you kind of knew who was in the club, so you'd say like, "Oh, this was this guy's bag and he uses these weapons, and I remember how he does that." And so somebody would get my bag that was full of like 6 revolvers, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's I didn't bring cargo pants. I gotta go back now." And I asked the people running the event if it was okay to hide things on campus beforehand. They said not guns, but other stuff. So I had hid a huge magazine, and they're interchangeable, like in a bush, like somewhere off campus. And so I got just like some whatever weapon, and I was like, "All right, well, whatever," but it takes the magazine. So I ran all the way across campus to retrieve my big drum, 35 dart magazine thing. And it's that extra little thing, like it's not like I wouldn't have had that much ammo, but like, were there situations where I needed that many more shots? There were, and I survived until the end because I had that thing. And so I don't know how you quantify that. Like, it's not always transferable to other activities. I know this is a completely preposterous example, but like, but there are things like that where, so for example, you maybe have seen on my stream, I have that thing that's like the ship that comes up. And that thing was difficult to make, and I'm not knowledgeable about that kind of thing, but I had just the right combination of people in my life where I could get bits and pieces of the information to make that thing. And I'm sure that has gotten me a non-zero amount of people that want to watch my stream because they think, "Oh, this is an interesting, different approach to, calling out people who recently followed you and supporting them." This thing, it's like an animated series of PNG images that are in a sequence file on my computer, and it plays like a very fast slideshow when I hit the button on my Stream Deck, and then there's a timer, and then it swaps to the other scene at the right time, and then anyway, and I have a little fish that jumps in the corner of the wave so you can sync it up. Anyway, all this stuff, and that's kind of this implaceable like other thing where sometimes people think of a unique idea that people just haven't done before, like on YouTube. There are people that in sports history have occasionally thought of a strategy that was not common, and so they succeeded for a while. Some of the time that led to changes in how the rules worked. There's a funny example from basketball that's a little different, where there was that one really tall player. I know very little about sports, but there was one absurdly tall player in basketball who was able to guard the goal constantly, and he caused them to implement a rule about you can't guard the goal. And then he pushed for a rule for a 3-point line because he didn't want the game to boil down to like him slapping the ball out of the air. He wanted people to be allowed to score from further away and get more points. And
honestly, it's like, it's quite fun if you were to be like that really tall guy, which I like. Me looking at basketball, they're all tall guys, but hey, like if you're that really tall guy and like you get to know basketball, and it's like, well, I don't see what the fuss about. I'll just reach out. I just hold them back. Yeah, it's like, don't worry, it's easy. Seriously though, I have never played any of these like Human vs. Zombies games or like the Hunger Games. I'd love to do that at some point because that sounds like so much fun. Like seriously, and like how many times do you have to like could you do that before they were like, okay, now we know you're gonna have something up your sleeve, and we're not
You
falling
can
for this
always
thing
come
again.
up with something else, baby. You think I can't? Those are like, that was like 2 of the like 17 tactics. Come on. You think I didn't just come up with something? The great thing is, once you do one tactic, it's actually your advantage, because the next time they know that you have the 5 pistols, but you don't have the 5 pistols. You wear the cargo pants, but you don't have the 5 pistols. And then when you violently drop your gun and say, "Oh, I'm out of ammo," everyone's like, back up, everybody back up, and then you just run away.
Yes, dude, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's not a problem at all. And you can rotate the tactics, of course. I had another one that was we didn't have a Walmart near us. We had a Target near us. And one really weird thing about the way Nerf guns and a lot of products are sold is they'll have some that are exclusive to one store and then others that are exclusive to another store. So it's not like they have a deal with just one store. It's like they sort of auction off their new product to like some or other store. And so a different combination of the things available are available at different stores. So it turned out that at Walmart, which we did not have near my college, but there was one you could get to. It was just far away. You could buy a stock for the back of your Nerf gun that was itself a gun with one shot. And it didn't really look like a gun, like it looked like a stock. And I had popularized using a stock as a counterweight because it makes it easier to hold up the gun with one hand if it's weighted on the back and then you got your big magazine on the front. You can keep it level more easily and move it around quicker. It's a small thing, but something people care about in actual fighting traditions, so why not in this one? And so this one was a gun. And so, of course, once you run out of ammo in your magazine, you got to take it off and reload it and put it back on. But I had a gun on the back of my gun. So you just take it off and boop. And it's easier to reload the single shot things because you just stuff a dart in the front and then you're good to go. And I got some people with that. You can throw socks at people instead of using a Nerf gun, and you can use both. So I did get somebody one time where I ran out of bullets and I took off my shoe and wadded up my sock and threw it at them. They got really mad at me, but like that counts. That's fine. That was common. I stole that from somebody else, but you can totally do that. That's fine. There's the infinite tactics. What we really need to do is like if we get TennoCon 2021 and we go, or like some other similar convention, that's like such a good time to do that. You definitely need to be careful about what space you use because it's a fairly disruptive activity. You know, you can't just go to a park and be like, we're playing catch. Like it's a lot of space, but
dude, like
we should find a time to do it.
Well, when this Corona thing settles and like we're allowed to travel again, I am sure that like we'll be able to like find enough people that we can just like, I don't care. Maybe I don't care how I'm gonna find the money, but I'll find the money. Like we'll get a place, like we'll fly over, we'll do that right there. It doesn't even need to be connected to a con. Like I just want to do that. Like we'll take a field, we'll take whatever. Maybe we can use like maybe they're like, I don't know, paintball grounds where you can like, can we just rent your pitch for like
possibly
an hour?
Yeah.
And we're just like, well, there's human versus zombies with the socks, because like, yay! Let me take off my shoes. Yeah, dude, that'd be brilliant. That'd be absolutely freaking brilliant. Oh my god. So
yeah, like that's one of the things that you mentioned, paintball, and exactly, it's like one of the advantages is that because the thing you're like attacking people with is so mundane, you can do more interesting creative things with it, whereas otherwise you could totally play a humans versus zombies kind of game with paintball guns, sure. But there's something kind of better in a way about the Nerf guns.
Yes.
It helps the zombies a little because Nerf guns don't have very good range. It's not literally a gun, it's just firing a little foam dart, and so the zombies have a better time because you can't just snipe them from all the way across the field. Like you're only going to reliably hit them once they're pretty close. Anyway.
Yeah. No, like absolutely. Like the thing with paintball is like it's fun. I've done it a couple of times, but like it's so constricted. Like you all know like what kind of guns everyone has. You kind of know what the rules are. Like there's no
you can't make a build.
No, you can't. Like there's no creative person. Like here's your gun. You just like shoot people with it. It's like, but what if I want to do this tactic or that tactic, or if I want to take my sock off to take someone down? Hey, you know, these are things like honestly, I would really love to do that.
We should do that. I'm incredibly on board. Like this is the kind of thing where like I graduated college and I was like, well, I did not have a good time in college overall, but I left college and I was like, well, that's gonna suck. Like, I'm not gonna be able to do that again anytime soon.
Honestly, this sounds like the greatest
Where?
college of all time. Like I have
Yeah,
not had that experience, but honestly, after podcast, I might have an idea how this might work. But a lot of this comes down to like when we can travel again, because like
of course. Yeah.
this will include travel and all that stuff. But yeah, like this could be this is a really fun thing. So anyway, let's get back to you studied music theory in high school. Where did that lead you to doing YouTube? First around like music, and then into Warframe, where you're doing Warframe game stuff videos now. Where did it
Well,
go?
the story doesn't like make more sense later if that's what you're looking for.
Doesn't
um,
matter. I'm curious. Like it doesn't need to make sense, but where did it go? Like how did it go?
yeah, it definitely doesn't. There's no like grand. So I mean, when I applied to college, I did apply for a couple of music theory colleges
Mhm.
that offered music production or music theory, and I applied to some for writing and English, creative writing. I'm not interested in English. I'm interested in creative writing. Um, and I ended up going to a liberal arts college in New York, just like everyone who says the things I just said. And it wasn't any particular school. Like it didn't have some focus or anything.
It was a
I
school
went there.
where they played with Humans vs Zombies with clocks and
Actually,
Nerf
no
guns.
joke. I did confirm that before I went to the school. I had a theater tech director in high school who came up to me privately before I was going to graduate and was like, "You should check if your school is Humans vs Zombies." And I was like, "That sounds fun, but not that important." And he's like, "It's extremely important." And I was like, "This is the most serious you've ever been in your entire life." And he's like, "I'm dead serious about this. Like, ask them if they have that. Like, or ask them if they would let you do that. You know."
Mm-hmm.
And so I did, and they did, and yeah. So I went to school and studied English, and I studied mostly literary English because I had no choice, and I did not like it, and I knew I wasn't going to like it. I just didn't have much of a choice if I wanted to do some creative writing. I wrote a lot of poetry. I wrote a couple of very short books, novellas. And did that kind of stuff. But of course, it was a liberal arts college, and it was pretty aggressively liberal arts college. It was the kind of like you have to do only the absolute minimum to complete your major, and then everything else can just be literally whatever. And that is what I did. I didn't like a lot of those classes, but it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot of philosophy, and I was trying to find this thing. I said there was this through line that I didn't know I had found, but I had found in high school, where I wanted builds and synergy and that thing, that mindset. And philosophy courses helped with that, but not quite as much as you'd think. You'd think that's where I would have figured it out. But I did some creative writing at the end of my senior year, where you could just focus on whatever you wanted. So I just did a bunch of writing, and I got bored of it, and I felt like it didn't matter to me because it didn't influence enough people. And this is where I started feeling like I cared more about metagaming a system. This was from HVZ, and influencing people. This was from writing and feeling like traditional literature doesn't influence people that much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not influential, but it's not a good tool for influencing people. Now that we have better tools, it's not a bad tool. It's not a great tool, and that ended up taking me to making videos and streaming on the internet, because I wanted something where I could use the ability to write and kind of backdoor myself into maybe writing. Like, I could publish my own book. That's better than applying to publishers. It's
Mm-hmm.
better to just make a YouTube channel and then whatever. And I remember my mother saying to me, "You're giving up on writing and publishing a book, whatever." And I was like, it is honestly easier to just forget about that for 4 years, make a YouTube channel, and then publish my book with my YouTube channel. This is directly pursuing that goal. And along the way, I just felt like I probably will still do that at some point. I don't know. But
It's
what I wanted to do was affect people, and
mm-hmm.
this is a better way to do that than what I was doing before.
It's probably even more financial viable to like do it
Yeah,
this way,
it
because
it
like
is.
there's the royalties I've heard on like books if you publish them are just nothing,
Yeah, they're
absolutely
very low.
nothing. So
Over time, it can be a lot just because it'll be all over the place for years. Like, imagine how much money you still make off of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on your region.
mhm.
Um, but at the same time, like, that's because that book is hilariously popular and became a cultural icon and defined an entire decade. And, um, so yeah, exactly. I mean, it's also more financially viable.
Yeah.
It was the best intersection of a thing that I am qualified to do and fulfills all my other goals and lets me directly pursue them, and I don't have to feel like I'm beholden to anything else. But of course, it is a little bit of a, the people in my life were very supportive, and if
Mhm.
that had not happened, you can't just up and do that. It's very difficult to get off the ground for the first usually couple of years, where it's not going to be enough to support you, but it's going to be a major roadblock if you have to work full time during that time. Of course, part time work is inevitable while you're starting out, but it's hard if you have to do a lot. There are people that do it, which is admirable. I'm impressed that they were able to, but having done it with part time work myself, it's hard. Like, that's a lot.
It
And
it's
good.
tough. It's honestly a really weird path where I think everyone that starts out kind of has this idea of like, hey, I can do this. Like you make your first video or like you engage in your first creative endeavor and you're like, this is something. Yeah. Like you look at Harry Potter or you look at like PewDiePie and you're like, yeah, I mean, I can get somewhere there. Like I'd like let's try this. And then like you start making your first things and that's quite all right. And like one thing that I really really enjoy about creative endeavors is the very like steep curve of improvement at the start. Like sometimes
Yep.
like I have so many times like I've had it with swimming, I have it now with making videos where like I am sometimes finding myself wishing back to go back to like the time where like every video I was like, oh, I can actually like fill the entire like video screen with my video and not like have huge black boxes on there. Oh, I can actually put music in here. Oh, if I actually like use a microphone, it sounds good. It's like those steps make things so much better and make you feel that progress so much. But unless you're like very very new to the field, and I don't even know when it applies to that because like I haven't been with like something like YouTube where I am right now, right from the start. I only came in like 2015, a little bit before that, but like not even then. Like I actually started out and I did not envision this to be anything pursuable. I was like, I'm playing this game. People have questions. Let me go answer them. And instead of like answering them every single time and copy pasting it, let me make a video. And oh shit, I like making videos. Let's pursue this. Um, but it's very much so that like once you like get up to a certain quality, or like you get up to a certain level where you're like, hey, these are pretty good things that I'm making. You'll find it like the pathway to being like viable or sustainable, or like you don't have to work a full-time job anymore because you can completely sustain yourself with this channel, or it's remotely successful, is like that's going to be a really long time depending on the circumstances. But like for some people it might be years, and for some people it might not even show up ever. Like I remember there being this great story of like a 70 something year old like musician that like always had this dream of being able to go on tour, and he never made it. So like he was working part-time jobs in restaurants and stuff. So he spent his entire life trying to like make it as a musician, and it never worked. And then one time like this like media outlet like caught wind of the story, and like they visited him. They did like a piece on him, like the 75-year-old man, or I don't know, 70-something-year-old man that was like trying to make it as a musician so many years later and always did part-time jobs. And then like the story got wind in the media, and all of a sudden he was touring around the world because everyone wanted to see him. So like it's such an uncertain thing to deal with if you really want to like be serious about this. And yeah, like doing a part-time job is very like I don't think anyone really can avoid that unless they have the sufficient support structures. A full-time job, I've heard about like streamers or content creators that do a full-time job and do this. Like, wow,
Yeah.
great job, amazing. But like it takes so much energy out of you that like how much do you still have to spend on like the thing that you want to pursue your dreams in?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's just like an amount of mental output that you're able to do, and it is, unmeasurable. But it must be very challenging if you have to work a lot on something else and then work a lot on this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on the person. I mean, there are people for whom they just have a bottomless wellspring of that and they can do it, but I would want to assume by default that it's very challenging.
Yeah.
I think that the thing about a job as open-ended as, excuse me, as YouTube or Twitch or whatever, is that it can move into other jobs very easily. And so if it doesn't work out, like, you're not out so and so many years of your life or anything. There's a lot of ways in which many YouTubers are using their YouTube channel as a bit of a resume for potentially other work. And that's a great way to do it, is if the YouTube channel takes off, the other work takes off, you're good. You can kind of do both and you're accomplishing the same thing. You can do things like I have Patreon, where I make content for Patreon that based on what people request. And so that's kind of its own sustaining, sort of commission-like thing. And I would have a bit of a background in that if I needed to shift to doing, like, I don't think I would be a good voiceover or voice actor person, but I guess theoretically I am experienced in that now in some way. And that would at least be an option open to me. I have done a little bit of that, and you could manage it for other people. You could work on other people, work with other people who needed that done, and you'd be able to support them in some way that way, etc. And Kickstarter is also, or things like it, GoFundMe, are also interesting options where you can get experience with managing a campaign rather than like necessarily being like an agent for someone. You have experience with promoting a thing, and then you can be helpful even if you're not directly successful, just as an aspect of some other campaign that someone else is doing. You can be a person that people sort of care about on the internet, and somebody will want to do a podcast and you can be on it. And it's nice to be able to, like, if you need help with something, like, I actually can do something to help because I have that accumulated background. So I think overall it is true that you could do the thing for a long time and kind of never succeed, for sure. It's not always growth. You can definitely hit a wall. Things can happen. But at the same time, I feel like it is a profession where your options are relatively open, even if you don't like directly succeed. And it's one where, as long as you stay open-minded, it's very hard for it to be the wrong choice. It's like almost like just making a YouTube channel and putting a couple of videos up. It's like buying a lottery ticket, sort of. Like, that's not how I treat it because I do it all the time, but like, your random cooking video might blow up and you might suddenly have a career in this thing. Like, you don't know. And it's worth doing, like, you might as well. And in the best case, it will go great, and in the worst case, you do still have that option open, So I don't know.
Does that approach also help you with what you said earlier? Like, some people have a hard time dealing with a not very guaranteed place of work environment where, like, if I start in this, there's very little guarantee that I'll make it, but if I like follow my education, like, there is this path laid ahead of me, or if I enter this company, there's this path laid ahead of me. Is this what you were describing, like your way that you can deal with this environment where things may be a lot more uncertain?
I personally don't mind. Like, I think that for a lot of people, it's a major weigh on their thoughts whether the thing they're doing has some kind of guarantee of value. But to me, I am very personally convinced that it does have value, and even if I have no doubt that it will work out. I just personally, I am the person for whom it, like, what I have seen so far is good enough evidence for me that this is a good idea. And I don't know that it's going to turn out financially in some predictable way, but I'm convinced that it is the right option for me where I am in my life, because it is flexible enough that doing anything else would just be limiting my options by some amount. And so whatever happens with this, I can rest assured that I wouldn't have been better off doing something else, because I would just have less options. There would be less flexibility. We're getting a bit of a payoff right now, where the world is in a bit of a restricted state, let's say, and we are benefiting from having something that we're already doing that you can just go right on. My daily life hasn't changed at all, and that is nice. It's nice to have my pursuit be uninterrupted by most aspects of daily life. A lot of things could happen in the world around me, and I could still just keep on keeping on with what I'm doing. And that is reassuring and a big advantage, and something I took from writing. One of the biggest advantages for poetry or a prose writer is that you get to practice your thing much more often than most people do. So when you're a musician, you can't just always play music. You can practice finger exercises and such, but it's not, you can't be playing that often, you know? And of course, if people do play really often, that's great, and they usually do a lot better. That's a route to success. But it's just challenging. Whereas if you just write, you can be writing like borderline all the time. Like you can, there's like nothing, you never have to stop. Like you can be in class, you can be on the bus, you can be in the car and just dictate to something in audio, and you never really need to stop. And that makes it much easier to improve given an amount of time. So for a lot of, for a lot of pursuits, it's like if you get a certain amount of time in your life, you have to measure it by how much of that time you can practice the thing during. So it's like right now, my girlfriend Anna lives home because she has her classes online. She's a graduate school. And so if I were playing kalimba constantly, I can't practice all the time because there's somebody else who needs to focus for a good amount of the time during the week. But if you're writing, it really doesn't matter. You could just be writing all the time no matter what's going on. And so it's kind of the same thing with, to a lesser extent, doing this job as a job, is that compared to other jobs that you're pursuing because you want to get better at them and succeed more, you get to pursue that with virtually any amount of free time. Like no matter what happens, whether you're home or not, whether you have a free day or not, there's not like a limited amount of like good you can do. Like you could always be making more, which is one of the hazards of this industry, is that it's hard to put it down and say, this is enough. I'm going to say this is enough. I always feel self-conscious that it's not. But still, that is a big strength of that thing, and something that I value a lot as someone who appreciated it when I was writing more. I really value the ability to get something or jot an idea down and have that actually gain me something meaningful, basically whenever, rather than it needing to be that I'm at work or whatever, So to answer your question, I would say only sort of. Like I don't really personally, I am maybe the slightly uncommon person who doesn't really want assurance of that thing. I just don't really believe in assurance and stability. It just doesn't exist. But of course I want it because I need it. I just don't think it's really attainable. You can never really know. And so it's just about hedging your bets that these decisions you've made are versatile enough that you will have some means to respond when a situation occurs. And so when you're restricted in some way, you're the least restricted, and then you'll gain some advantage there.
No, I can definitely see that. I mean, like even in this time right now, it's like everyone that thought that like they had a stable job in the airline industry or they had a stable job at a restaurant in February of like 2020, like they would have never guessed that. And like things can change. I definitely believe that like the stability idea that everything is like set in stoning, like it's especially this time has like shown me that it's like this idea of like, oh, everything's going to be the same. It's not. And some people have described this period as like the nap from like around the Second World War, like 1950s till now was like the big nap where like everything was going like quite stable and like there weren't that many troubles and things were fine. And now with like what we're seeing with COVID, it's like, well, this world that we think is so stable and so secure and like, well, something might come along and now we're forced to stay at home. And that's like the weird thing. It's like for most people that like they have to like be at home. It's not like that they can't work because of like some sort of inability or because like the economy is crashed. No, it's like they can't work because they can't go out to do their job. And that's definitely something which, like what you say, like being able to do or practice your craft everywhere. That is amazing. Like I absolutely love that. I've had multiple times where like I've been trying to like plan vacations with friends, which like don't really work out anymore now these days. But like I try to do that, and then they'd be like, oh well, I gotta like see where my vacation is with school, and I gotta see how I can do this with work, and I'm like, well, I just take a laptop, I take a camera, I take a microphone, and boom, I got my work with me. And like, who knows? Maybe if we get into an interesting place, I can like flog this thing, and that gives me extra like work that I can do. So like that freedom that something like this provides in return for having like a little less certainty, where like certainty, like you can never really be certain, is something which like I agree definitely like attracts me to something like this.
Well, and another, I think one of the biggest drawbacks is just that you get paid much less at the beginning, like
Mm-hmm.
compared to most work. Is that if you get the lowest paying job you can get in this part of the world generally, that's still much, much more than you make for the first, beginning third of the curve of getting more money doing this thing that we're discussing. So, I mean, there are severe drawbacks, of course. There's a very good reason not everybody does it, but I still feel like what we were saying before, we both brought up this idea of like splashing in it a little bit and having a channel and making some videos, because why not?
Mm-hmm.
And having that there, because there are a lot of people for whom they have to go home from work now and they're kind of around and they're really painfully bored, as a lot of them have told me. And for them, it's like, well, you could pick that up now. Like you have the opportunity to resume that thing. And I know a lot of people are hesitating to pick up hobbies during this period of time because they feel like they won't have time for the hobby once this period's over. But this is going to last long enough that you could complete something during this
Mm-hmm.
time. Like you don't have it's okay if you have to stop it when it's over. And I feel like having those multiple pursuits, it might feel like burdensome or challenging because you have this other thing that you're beholden to in some way. I don't know. I mean, you're not,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. It's like this other thing in your life, but it's really valuable. I mean, having the ability to even doing just streaming and making videos both makes me feel like, however bad somebody mouths off to me while I'm streaming and I feel a bit hurt by it, like that's just only so much of my life. Like it's only a third of my life, and so they're a third of my work life. It's a small part of my life. And then I can go do videos and that's totally separate. And I can do Patreon and that's totally separate. And then like I have the rest of my life and I have other pursuits and other people in my life and then just me by myself in my life and cooking and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And having all those things lets you compartmentalize that stuff, which is healthy emotionally, but it also lets you compartmentalize risk that you'll get blown out productively. It means if you can't do something, you can still do those other things. And I don't know. I guess I feel like there's probably a good reason a lot of people don't do that, but it would be worth trying for everyone.
Yeah.
It's just so valuable and it's free. Like it's kind of like you make a YouTube video and you're kind of buying a lottery ticket. Like it doesn't have to be this fancy thing. You don't have to have a good idea. Have you seen that one video of this guy like mowing his lawn with a scythe? There's just the most random videos. It's just like a guy just totally normally mowing his lawn with a scythe. He's just like, it's time to mow the lawn with a scythe. I'm mowing a lawn with a scythe. Like it's not a meme or anything. It's just he has to mow his lawn and he mows it with a scythe. And there's nothing like really. I mean, scythes are cool. Don't get me wrong. Like mowing a lawn with a scythe is satisfying to watch. Sure. Are you looking at this video?
Yes, this video's got 12 million views,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called
Yes.
Autumn Mowing Lawns and Meadows with a Scythe. A
Yeah.
video
Like
diary of autumn mowing tasks with a scythe. And it's a guy mowing grass with
scything a
scythe.
field. Yeah. Like it's not as like a joke, it's not like edited in an interesting way. It's not like there is nothing exceptional about that video. Like obviously scythes are like a lot of people aren't familiar with like people scything a field, but that's pretty minor, you know what I mean? And like you could put up just kind of like whatever mundane thing you do in daily life that's just a bit outside of the ordinary, and like you are basically buying yourself a lottery ticket with your free time to maybe have a surprise career opportunity. And if it happens, you don't have to take it either. Like you could just be like, "Oh, I'm fine. Like what I'm doing makes me happy, so I just won't do this." But that option becomes there. And then if you want to develop that as a hobby, it's there too. I know not everybody wants to make videos on the internet, but I still feel like that general advice is useful.
Yeah.
And it is why I feel what I would call secure, even though I don't really believe in secure. I mean, I don't not believe it's valuable. I don't believe it is attainable. I feel like you could always get blown out. You just have to minimize the chances.
Definitely. I mean, I think mostly it's like peace of mind for people. I would definitely recommend pick something up outside of what you're doing, even if you're like very like focused on the thing you're doing and you really
Yeah.
enjoy the thing you're doing. Try something else, because this is something where I can kind of speak from personal experience. Oh, you're right. All right. So like I can kind of speak from personal experience where I um started doing this YouTube thing without like real focus on anything. Like I just wanted to start making videos, and I really enjoyed it, and decided, you know what, I really want to go through with this. This is something which I really want to do, and I believed in this fallacy. What, well, I call it fallacy right now because I've seen the effects of it. But like one thing that I strongly believed in was, if you looked at successful people, if you looked at like what stories and movies and what they portrayed about the successful people, it was this idea that like if you like something, like you put a bit of time in it, and like we talked about this too. It's like, and like if you like a little bit more, then you put some more time in it, and then like you put a little bit more time
Mhm.
in it, you get better at it, and the more time you put in it, the better you get at it. And like the people that were really successful, like what you always hear, or most of the time will hear, is like they loved it, they always loved this one thing, and they were always doing this one thing, and they put all their time and effort into doing this one thing, and that's why they got so good into doing this one thing, and that's the way that they succeeded, because they put all their time and effort into doing this one thing. So, as you said, like this is an industry where like or a craft where you can put all your time and effort into. So I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. I don't want to fuck around. I really love this thing. I know I can do this. Let me put all my time and effort into it, and let me dedicate my entire life to it. So like there isn't it even goes so far, like there is no office building I go to, there is no place I go, like it's literally in the room that I sleep in. Like that's where I do the thing. So like from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, like 365 days a year, do the same thing. And it sounds like that should be like a recipe for success, but like this is the thing which I've kind of, well, I don't know whether it's come to realize, but this is the thing which I believe in now, is after having done that for a couple of years, it's probably most people that have been successful, like they have done that thing, they have devoted a lot of time to that, towards it, but that doesn't mean that everyone that devotes so much time to it will be successful. And
Yeah.
especially
Oh,
when it
yeah.
and especially when it comes to like things like YouTube, it is so like circumstantial as like how successful you'll be. So like you, like as an example, like one thing, and I think like I believe we spoke about that last year. Like I made a video where I put like 2.5 weeks worth of like editing time in it, and I barely got any views. And it's like that's something where like the amount of time and effort you spend into something doesn't always equate the amount, like the response you'll get from it. So like what I've found is that like um I would strongly recommend doing something else, because if there's only like one thing that you're really doing, then if even without any fault of your own, like the results of that thing aren't as you want it to be, and you're feeling a little bit like not happy about that, which like can definitely happen, then like at least you have this other thing where like if they're not correlated because they're like two different things that you're doing, um, then at least like you have this one other thing where you're like, oh hey, at least things may be bad in this thing, but on this aspect, I'm actually learning a little bit. Like I actually just like made my first video, or like I played my first musical instrument, or I read a book. It's like at least that gives you something else to like go on. So like I would definitely recommend do more things for the sake of like your own happiness, but also just for like try more things. It's like you only have one fucking life. Like, are you gonna like spend your life not figuring out how to like read a book, play a guitar, like whatever? Like there are so many interesting things, and I believe there's like too little time, but I still want to try and
Well,
experience most.
well, I think that the kicker too is that it will make you enjoy, even if you genuinely only want to do this one thing, you
Mm-hmm.
should still do other things because you'll enjoy that thing more. Like the contrast will make you like it more. You'll appreciate this other thing that you love so much more because you have this other thing that you can compare it to, that you have as an example, as contrast, um, with relationships, with games that you play, with whatever. The doing more things, having more examples in your life is gonna make you appreciate the things about the thing that you enjoy more, and it's gonna make it more of a treat when you do it because you're not just doing it. It's not a given that you're just doing it all the time. even if that does, you don't have to starve yourself of the thing,
Mm-hmm.
but doing other things will still make it feel like now I get to do this thing that I find fun, like, and that will make it more fun. You will have a better time. So I agree that for the most part, most people probably don't want to do one thing literally all the time, and they should not be afraid to try other stuff, of course. But at the same time, I also think, like, even for people who don't feel that way, you should still do that because you're just going to enjoy it that much more. And I think that the argumentative thing I want to end our discussion with and see if people write about in the comments is when I play games like, so Smash Ultimate,
Mm-hmm.
uh, games like that. So these games have a lot of characters. They're competitive games. They're highly competitive games. They have a very high skill ceiling. You can get very good at them. And I am very familiar and sick of this idea that you need to pick a main in these games. And this term refers to the idea that, like, you find the character that's for you and you practice the hell out of that character and you know everything about that one character and that is your character. And I think this makes you not bad at the game, but it makes the skill non-transferable. And the way to learn things that makes you better at everything is to dabble in everything in the game, to play every character, be able to play every character, even force yourself to play some of the characters you don't like, and give yourself that wide specialization and that experience of going through everything about the thing, which lets you contrast. You notice what strengths things have more easily. You notice what options other characters have. In other parts of your life, you notice, like what you might be losing about this thing that you're committing all your time to, and you get to decide without having to guess. You really experience, is it worth it to commit all my time to this? And for a lot of people, it's going to be like, yeah, you're going to discover it is worth it, but you don't have to doubt that anymore. Now you get to have more surety that that thing that you committed yourself to is a good commitment. You're not like missing out. You're missing out on something, but
Mm-hmm.
you kind of know what it is, and you don't have to worry that there are, if you are worried, if you do think it's something better to commit to, you can change your mind,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is important. I feel like it would never hurt. I know that people like to commit to one thing and narrow their field of vision because it's reassuring and it makes you feel like you don't have to. You can just kind of ignore the concern that maybe it's not the right thing to focus on or whatever. But I feel like it's better to just not be afraid of that and just let yourself find out, like, how do you feel about these other things? It'll make you enjoy the thing more if it's what you really like, and then you'll have an option open if it's not, or if something goes wrong. So I don't know. That's my justification for why I had this sort of hurdy-gurdy pursuit of the things I studied in my life, and I tried all these different things and whatever. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to try enough things that I felt like, there would be benefits to writing all the time instead of doing what I did here, but they're not better, I don't feel, than what I got by doing this. And I don't have any doubt that this was a good decision, even if I'm not omniscient and I don't know if it was the right decision. I'm still assured that it was a good decision because I checked both sides a little, as much as I was able, and I had a good reason to make that decision. I can sleep soundly at night feeling like I know that there is some reason to think this is a good decision.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think everyone should always be skeptical. Like, I don't want you to think that I'm positive, that I don't doubt that I should be doing the thing I'm doing. I think you should, and I happily enjoy doubting whether I should do what I'm doing. But it's pleasant to have some evidence that maybe it is a good choice. So that's all.
I think it's like it's really good to be skeptical of the thing that you're doing and being constant reflection. At the same time, it's like it's this weird thing if you come to the realization that, like, a lot of what you think matters just, like, doesn't matter. Like, if you take a look at, like, what's an important event to you, that something that might be like a life-changing event to you might be like less of a life-changing event for, like, your family, even less for the group of friends around you, even less for, like, the community you live in, even less for, like, the city you live in, even less for, like, the country you live in, even less for the entire world. And then think about, like, how infinitely big, like, the universe is. It's like, in the end, like, it doesn't matter. Like, objectively, I don't think that there is objective value inherently anywhere, but we create the value for, like, the social structures that we have and, like, what we perceive as important. So, like, as long as you believe that things are important to you, well, then they are important to you, and like you should make sure that like you pursue the things that are important to you, because why would anyone else do that for you, and why would you not do that in like this brief time that you have on this earth? And like even like this is the weird thing, like you see it with the coronavirus, like boom, world can change in a minute, and like this is just like a virus. Like what would happen if like we can't see into space? So like we can't see everything. Like what if an asteroid were to like hit the planet? And like, you know, there's no guarantees in the future. It's like try and do the things that make you happy. um so yeah, like I'm a strong believer in that you'd like just follow the thing that you're passionate about. Try to be skeptical about what you do, try to be realistic about what you do. But like don't let your dreams be dreams. Sounds a little bit too hopeful than I'd like it to be, but yeah, I'm I agree on that part. Speaking of writing, are you still active? Like, do you still write sometimes aside from like things that you do for YouTube videos, Patreon, and Twitch?
I write down. I don't write like formal finished prose and poetry very
Mm-hmm.
often, but I dream journal a lot. I have a lot of very intense dreaming in my life, and I do write those down. And I often write down concepts that I liked from, if you want to say stealing from media that I consume. Because I remember, oh, this was a good idea, a good way to explain this, or a good way to demonstrate this concept. And if I ever wanted to portray that idea, this was a pretty good approach that I should think about when I portray it. If not, do the exact same thing, whatever. Um, so in that sense, yes, I certainly think about ideas for stories all the time. I have so many, and I've always had so many, that it's a matter of choosing. There are a few, like there's something I wrote when I was in college that I mentioned earlier that I am still working on. It's going to be a while before I feel like I'm happy with it. It's got a long way to go. It's a challenging concept, but I do still want to work on that. I read a book, Haruki Murakami's Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, which is, yes, the title of the book. It's really long. It's a book that takes place in two halves, so every other chapter is like a different story. There's like two stories, and they flip-flop. And they're connected in these really interesting ways. And I don't want to spoil anything about the book because I really recommend it. It's weird, but it's a lot of fun. Don't try to understand literally everything about it. Don't stress yourself out doing that. Just read it and enjoy it, and understand when you want to try to understand. But it's interesting, and it does this really cool thing where, to explain in a nutshell, it's like because you're reading a story with a very different tone every other chapter, and the chapters are short, that tone, that fantastical tone, carries over into the more realistic one. That groundedness carries over into the more fantastical one. And you put yourself in this weird mindset where you're reading about this clearly surrealist environment in half of the book, but you approach those chapters thinking in terms of the real world because you were just there in the other half of the book. And that carryover effect is really fascinating and very effective. And that's something I have not seen done effectively very much. I've seen it attempted a few other times, and I didn't think it worked very well. So I'm trying to do something different with it in my own writing, but not too directly. I feel like my if I'm gonna self-publish a book, I need to work more on the being able to self-publish part than I need to on the book personally.
Mm-hmm.
I already have a draft of the book theoretically. It just needs a huge amount of editing, which is no small feat. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't even really matter to me that much unless I get to share it with people. That would be a lot of my motivation. I'm not the kind of writer where I just have to get it out. I'm the kind of writer who's motivated by getting to share it. Like if people aren't going to find it interesting, that's why I wrote it. I had the idea, and out of all those other ideas, I wrote this one because I thought this one was interesting to other people. They're all interesting to me. They were my ideas. But so I don't know. So yes, a little bit. Maybe in like 5 years you'll see something.
I would absolutely love to like read it. Like I would love for like this thing to come to fruition, that you were able to publish it. Like let's just that just needs to happen because I'm really curious. Like you've mentioned the like draft that you have. Like I think last year to me for the first time, and ever since like I've been very very curious about like what it is like.
Oh, you'll see it at some point. Yeah. I mean, even if I can't make it really good, it's like I would like people to see the idea too. One of the great things about not ultimately not wanting to write it for me is that I care more about showing you the idea than like a perfect. I don't need it to be perfect, even though I'm a bit of a perfectionist,
Hmm.
because it's not really for me. Like I
Yeah.
don't. So I don't really mind. And so you'll see it anyway. It's just a matter of like the thing you should hope is that you see a good version of it. You'll see some version of it, but I don't. I can't promise you how good it's gonna be.
Hmm.
I'll do my
So,
best.
so there is a lot of things that we haven't gotten into, but given the time that it is right now, we should probably like round it up right now. So, like, there's if you ever want to come back, there's a lot of things which I would love to talk deeper about, especially like the dream journal. I wanted to ask you like what the most interesting dream was that you'd be willing to share, but I don't know
We
if
could
we
do a
have.
whole thing on that. Yeah.
Dreams
No.
are
Yeah.
so
Totally.
interesting. Dreams are so freaking interesting.
I have a complicated relationship, so that could be another one. Sure.
it's it's so weird. Like people still don't understand dreams. Are they just like a byproduct? Like anyway. And we haven't even touched on to Warframe yet. Like the thing that you said at the start. Oh, we're definitely gonna come back to, but time passes so quickly. So that being said, if people want to support the book or the draft that like the publishing to come to fruition, how can they do that? What will be the best way to like support you in the endeavors that you do?
Oh boy. So, I mean, first of all, the disclaimer here is that keep in mind, this is a primary goal for my
Mm-hmm.
life as a whole, but you were supporting this thing very, very indirectly. Like, you obviously, like, giving me money on Patreon does get me closer to being able to make this thing, but like, I am going about it like through the back door. So, it's not like I'm going to directly give you updates about how the book is going or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely something I'm coming back around to in my life. But it is, as I mentioned before, one of the original goals that I had when I started an online presence in the first place was to enable me to promote something like that myself if I got to finish it. And I'm now quite confident in my life that I will have time to finish it. And I mean fit anyway. So I would say at the moment, I mean the place that I am in my career is that I sort of view it as being like there are sort of three stages of online presence. There's the one where you're starting out, there's the one where you're known but not at a critical mass, and then there's the critical mass. I am in the middle of the known but not critical mass stage. So the most important thing during that stage is growth. At the beginning, growth is the thing that will always happen because you have no followers.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're at that critical mass, you sort of don't need growth as much as you need retention, and you really need to focus on retention. But at the stage I'm at, it's like the thing you would lack that you need is growth. So if you want to consume anything that I make, just watching videos or watching streams, or all of my Patreon content is free for everyone, so you can go watch those videos or read the I do a podcast there every week. It's just updates about me, so if you don't care about me, you're not going to like it. But that stuff is all free. My Patreon is only about supporting me if you can and getting to like prompt the content, like ask for topics for the content. It's free for everyone, and so it's that stuff. It's consuming that stuff that helps the most. Obviously, like I need to make more money in my life. Obviously, there are other things that would benefit me, but the most important thing would be just more people having been exposed to the things I'm making. That is the thing that is most needed at this medium size. Once I get to that critical mass, the other things will. It's not like they don't matter if you contribute them, but I will get there. I'll find a way to get there. People will be willing to help, and eventually it will work out. It's at this stage where I have been stalling at this size for a while, and it's because it's hard. You can't galvanize support out of nowhere. Like a lot of the people that are interested in what I'm doing already know about me. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can't just grow at the drop of a hat. Like people in the Warframe community who like what I'm doing know about me. You can't just go get more like that. It might be all of them. Uh, I don't think I can't grow anymore. I'm just saying that is what would help. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Anyway, actually, there's so many interesting points. There's so many. There's
Count
so
no no
much longer that we could talk
count
about things.
count on a couple more of these. We should do one on
Mm-hmm.
Warframe and we can do one about the dream journaling thing.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a fun time, and yeah, we'll see you next time for a future episode.
Yes, you will.